Good afternoon. My name is Greg Hastings. I'm from RIVR Solutions. This is my business partner, Alistair McIsaac. We make up RIVR. Occasionally we have big projects that we bring other consultants in for, but pretty much we do a lot of the work and what we do. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we do here in a little bit. Today we know that there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, inflation, tariffs, all of this, and it's completely impacting your businesses. And so I'm gonna show you a few slides of information you probably already know to kind of set the stage, and then we're gonna talk about just some simple ways that, some starting points fundamentally that you can look at your business in a different way and see how, and see if you can just do some simple things that are moving forward. Is there any questions before I get started? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself too, here in a little bit. So today is like I said, we're gonna talk about why costs are rising and what's causing it. We're going to talk a little bit about systems and where waste hides in your facility. Before we get started, I don't want to do everybody. How many are working food? How many actually have a facility, or are you just doing startups? Where are you working?
My family and I own and operate Wolf Honey, so we're vertically integrated apiary and honey processing facility.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, good, great.
We're from Mountain View Poultry processing facility.
Oh, okay.
SR Blending, which is a bakery mix manufacturer.
Oh, fantastic. What about you guys over here?
Brewery. We do a contract brewery.
Brewery?
Yeah.
Awesome.
We're from Venture Park. We're a not-for-profit organization that helps food and beverage startups.
Oh, wow. Good. That gives me a little context of who we've got here, which is good. And then I don't know if anybody's thought about it, but how many people think about, I want to talk about our company culture when you want to reduce cost? Probably not too many. One thing that we discovered early on with RIVR, we've now been doing this for 6 years as RIVR Solutions, and Alistair met before that. We can put systems in and we can take cost reduction measures and all of that, but if your culture doesn't support it, it will just be a fad. It'll be something that you tried for a month and we just went back to our old ways. So we spend a lot of time with organizational development, making sure that we have clarity between our processes and our job descriptions and our organization chart, and we have clear reporting structures and that kind of thing. And then having a really clear coaching model, and we'll talk about the culture of continuous improvement here in this session. And then I hope then you can walk away here with some real practical actions that you can do when you get back to your facilities, all the way back up to Wolf and
That's windy, a lot more snow.
Yeah, I bet. I'll tell you about why is this guy talking to me. I come from Portland, Oregon. Grew up born and raised, but I met a lovely Canadian about, we'll have our 10th anniversary this year. We met at a drinking club with a running problem, and I have 2 daughters. One is graduated from University of Hawaii last year and now lives in Denver. And my other daughter still lives in Portland and is a vet tech down there. Grew up in a little town on the Deschutes River. Ended up guiding boats in Madison. Went to Oregon State and got in after graduation. I started as a process engineer in semiconductor industry. So we were making silicon wafers for Intel and IBM and Motorola and those kinds of folks. Ended up going to seminary in Boston University and lasted 1 year in the church and went to ATS. ATS is actually a Canadian company. And I served in several roles in that organization and got my lean manufacturing training at the Delphi Institute. I did most of my lean implementation at Keith Manufacturing. I took a tour of that facility. They make walking floors in the transportation industry. And they still have a lot of the systems that we implemented 15, 20 years ago. And then went through the Riverman Boat Works, got into aerospace, and spent the last 10 years of my career building parts for Boeing mostly. So now we've landed here. I came to Canada in 2018. I met Alistair at ProSolve in 2019, and we started River Solutions in 2020. I've probably done now over 200 Kaizen events. I've helped. We've helped 35 plus companies and facilitated up to 8 river robot simulation kits. We're a consultant for BDC. We connect with EMC and of course the AFPA. Some of the food companies, we've done work with Alberta Milk. I don't think the cheese factory's around anymore, is it? But we spent one day figuring out the optimum temperature we could pull cheese at for their beer cheese. We also did some warehousing and processing work for Rosso here in Calgary. And Wild Prairie Soap Company in Edmonton, they do a lot of things that are related to food. They still mix. They still maintain temperature on things and whatnot. So those are some of the types of clients we have in the food industry. Alistair and I say we are industry agnostic because we've done every industry out there. So let's talk about, like I said, let's talk about the things you probably already know. By the way, I want this to be fairly conversational, so if you have a question or say something, please bring it up. We'll stop, and I am aware of the time, but I always want to answer people's questions along the way. What we know here is that food prices are going to increase in 2026 by 4 to 6%. That an average family, average annual food spend for a family in 2026 is going to be about over $17,000, which is pretty significant. Food prices are 27% higher than 5 years ago. And here's an interesting, it doesn't look like a lot, but the sales forecast is actually going to increase in 2026. Almost at the same rate that it's going to decrease in volume. So, which means that the prices are going up, and when the prices go up, people are going to spend less money, with less volume in their forecasts. What are some of the main inflation drivers for processors in these sectors? The top one is, of course, trades and tariffs and compliance. And I was talking to Bianca last night about some of the crazy rules that are changing in the Canadian federal government, and you guys are having to react and deal with those kinds of things. And we heard today too about how tariffs have impacted your industry as well. Imported inputs, so costs from the U.S. and other imported goods are rising, and combining that with the weak Canadian dollar. Climate supply shocks. This has to do with the geopolitical landscape that is going on today in the world. And of course, packaging metal costs, labor constraints, and weak consumer demand is really impacting what you guys do. And how do those cost pressures flow through the supply chain? Well, we have these global shocks, the tariffs, the geopolitical conflict, brings in uncertainty. We've seen in our industry, people when things aren't good, people want to hold on to their money. They don't know what's going to happen down the road. So Why are they going to spend money on a consultant when we don't know what's going to happen in 3 months, right? It's a very real thing. And that goes across the board. We have processor costs, rising costs for imported ingredients, packaging and energy, labor constraints, changes in, and then what happens then? Then we have to raise our prices, and processors implement those increases, and then we have that market outcome of that higher sales volume, but lower output, and that's impacted by a 27% 5-year high in prices. So first, it inputs on your labor and on your process input, and then into your labor, and then the changeovers and downtime, and then that margin squeeze that you're looking at. So why do we paint this gloomy picture, right? And it's because, excuse me here, a lot of what we've heard, even today, when we talk about operational efficiency and processes and whatnot, it's all about digitization, AI, and automation, and digitization, right? What I'm here to tell you is that what I've been saying all along is that to reduce our costs, we want to first eliminate before we automate, right? And partly because is that if you don't address what you have in your processes and what you're doing in your culture, you're going to automate that waste right along with everything else, right? So you're just going to be creating waste a lot faster along the way. So really paying to standardizing your process and looking at some of those systems that can eliminate some of the waste. And we can use AI, and we can use it. I'm not saying don't do that, but be conscious of that process, and be conscious of how you do it, and how much variation you have in a process. I have a client up in Grand Prairie. I started in with those guys, and I said, and we started mapping out the process. And people were actually having an argument in the conference room, because they go, well, I do it this way, and I do it this way, and I do it this way, right? They had a great culture because it was a get it done culture, right? So everyone would just get it done, but they would do it in 4 different ways, right? But what happens with that? They still have to give it to the same person, and that person has to figure out, well, this guy did it this way, and this guy does it this way, and this guy does it this way. So they have to think about how to actually do their job based on the inputs they're getting in 4 different ways. Does that make sense? So if we can really focus on our processes, but then also create a culture where continuous improvement and eliminating waste is a given thing, and you can maintain those changes and those habits, then the outlay in capital investment, the outlay in digitization and whatnot, is not your first step. It's really the low-cost things that you can do and control inside your own organization that's really going to make a difference. So how many people here are familiar with lean manufacturing, those terms? I'm just going to pick on you. What's your sense of what lean manufacturing is?
Oh man, I haven't heard that word in 20 years. It's just lean manufacturing was one of the subjects I took at university. Okay,
good. That's good to hear, actually, because we've been wanting to get into some of the regional schools, and people say, well, people don't have a demand for that, and
it's easier in some industries rather than, in my opinion, in food. Food is harder than like oil and gas, right? So I haven't really done a lot of focus on lean applications.
Sure, and I can tell you that oil and gas generally doesn't have any lean practices.
Well, no, like just-in-time principles.
Yeah.
How are you going to do just-in-time when suppliers
For sure.
are only making a small commodity or
yeah.
It's tricky.
What's your background?
Lean is quite important to us right now, so finding efficiencies wherever we can. So one of the things right now that's top of mind is like our energy efficiency, so
Okay.
our pipes to capture more heat. And we have a really great culture. It's kind of like a fun game for everyone. It's like, where can we find what?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
It's not like, oh, that's cost savings, and I want to do this, and this because they're cheap. It's like a really fun, exciting game. But we have an amazing team to support that. So.
That's fantastic. That's good to hear. Yeah, lean isn't a discipline. Lean is a disciplined way of removing non-value-added effort. I've got so much material, like I couldn't even give it to you in an hour of what tools and systems that the toolbox that we have. But we generally want to improve flow and solve recurring problems at its root. It's not about layoffs. It's really about the practical ways that we can free capacity, stabilize output, and reduce disruption. I was talking to a gentleman today about scalability, and I think Mark said it today, is that they got this really big order, and they had to scale back, right? Because they just didn't have the equipment, systems, or processes in place to do that. But if we can standardize our processes and eliminate that waste, it's going to be a lot easier to scale down the road when you do get those big jobs. I like using this slide, and I put this in, and it's something to be aware of. When at my last job that I was in, we were building parts for Boeing, and Boeing came to us one day and said, "Listen, starting at the end of the year, we're going to pay 5% less than what you're charging right now. It doesn't matter if you invoice us the same. We're just going to pay 5% less." And you can jump up and down and say no, but we'll just go somewhere else to get the parts, right? It's almost the same thing as you guys having no control over how much thick stuff costs when you buy ingredients and buy stuff coming in packaging and that stuff, right? You don't have any control over it. We didn't have any control over it. So you really have to look at, when you're looking at lean, is most people have a cost out approach. We know that it takes this much to manufacture or make what we have. I know I want X amount of profit. And when I add those two things together, I get a market price somewhere out here. The question is am I competitive, right? Is that market price is somebody going to buy something else because it's cheaper than what I can make it for? But if you have a Boeing that says, I'm going to pay 5% less, I'm stuck with that market price, right? I'm stuck with a competitive price there. And what I need to do is eliminate the waste in my processes to reduce my costs. And hopefully I can reduce that cost well enough that I'm only going to hit my price, but I'm going to reduce waste so that I can also gain a little bit more profit as well. And that's really the goal in setting up those systems. The other key piece of lean is, and this is kind of complicated, but is that time of investment, is that cash flow of shortening the time between the time I spend the money on the ingredients and the time that I sell that product, right? When I add value, I want to spend the money and I want to get money back for it, right? With profit, right? So I don't want to buy a lot of inventory and let it sit for 6 months or a year. I might have gotten a really good deal on a volume buy, right? But it's still sitting there and I still spent that money, right? And it's going to take me a while to recover. That's what that's about. So in lean management, I call this the three-legged stool because if you're losing one, you're not going to be able to sit on the stool very well. One is really gaining the knowledge of your process, really understanding that, when we were working with the cheese, is they were working at a certain temperature, but it really wasn't working out all that well. Once we were able to dial in and get some real knowledge of the process, we could optimize that temperature, and they could work it easier and more efficiently. The next piece is that this leadership piece is really understanding, staying on top of things, maybe having that culture of really making it safe to make change and whatnot. And neither of those things will work unless we perform and get the job done. Right? So really paying attention to all three of these things is really a key to understanding what's going on. What do we mean by value added? Jeez. Can anybody answer when we have value added activity, when you're doing something on the floor, what's value added and what's non-value added? Value added activity is anything that the customer is willing to pay for, right? You have a product. You create that product from nature. You create that product from mixing ingredients. You do that from one thing to the next. Whatever you're doing that's not part of that is waste, is non-value added activity. And that's really what you want to be focusing on, is what is the non-value added activity that that the customer is not willing to pay for. They're not willing to pay for transportation. They're not willing to move and pay for things going from one point A to point B. They usually don't like to pay for all the inventory they have in stock. If you're not adding value, you're just adding cost. And that's the way we got to think. We got to switch our minds around and think about that. And how much time do you think is wasted in traditional businesses? And I know no one has a traditional business, but for the amount, and I see this. I saw this week. I was at a client in Nisku, and they had these kind of numbers. How much do you think is non-value added in typical processes?
50%.
50%?
I was going to say, I hope it's less than 50.
Check this number out.
Oh no. Was that a government organization?
What's that?
I used to work for government. Can confirm. Yeah.
No, it was not a government organization. People do not realize how much time is spent with non-value added activity. I mean, you can kind of just rationalize it in their head. I was observing a forming operation, and we had it on video, and we were showing. So the guy was doing it. The machine was stopped. There was nothing else. He had all these pieces that he had set up, and he was actually taking a drawing and laying out the bends on the piece of metal. And then he had to go and set up the machine, and then, which took probably 15 minutes to do all of that. And he had 12 pieces for that, and he went over and bent those 12 pieces in what? 3 minutes, right? So the value add was about 3 minutes, and people go, well, he had to do the layout, he had to do all this, but did he really have to do that in a line, right? Could he have done that offline while you're doing something else, or could we somehow be more efficient in all of that? So that's just one example that you hope it's 50%, right? But when you really start laying it out, it typically ends up being 10%. Here's the other thing that people also think of. Oh my gosh, I've got to speed up. I've got to make, and I've got to shorten my cycle time down, right? I got to mix this ingredients faster. I got to figure out how to cure this in a shorter amount of time. This is in your value added. So if I want to reduce waste and value added time, people look at this part of the process that you're really adding value. And overall, if I'm going to reduce this time by 25%, in the overall time, it's only 2.5% of value add. Where if I really look at the time that the customer is not paying for, and I reduce the time by 25%, I'm now going to get at least a 22.5% increase by trying to reduce my non-value added time just by 25%. Does that make sense? I'm not going to go through all these, but if you've had any lean training, and you can go online and say, what are the 8 wastes. These are the things that you can look for. We talked about inventory. Overproduction is a real key waste, and it's the one that's most counterintuitive. Fred's over there staying around. It's towards the end of shift. If I just give him one more thing to do, one more thing to make, then I don't need it right now. It's for a job or for an order 2 or 3 weeks from now. But I'll get it done and it'll be ready to go. That's overproduction. And now you've just invested. You put value in this order, and then in 2 or 3 weeks, could that person then maybe cancel the order, right? Or could they have changed their order? Now you've introduced rework because you've already done it, and now you have to go back. We talked about conveyance. Defects is fairly obvious. Processing waste and operational waste. If I do things in 1, 2, 3, it goes this way. But if I switch the order in the way I do things, maybe I could do things a little bit faster. That's one. Operation waste is a lot of what we call motion of economy. Am I having to turn around and pick this water bottle up and bring it all the way over? Or can I just set it from here to here? Right? Can I move things, kind of rearrange my stations? Can I do whatever? Of course, idle time. And then, are we using our employees to the best of their ability? Did we hire right? Did we do all those things that people are in the right job fit and are happy doing the work? These are all things that we can watch and look for and observe. Now we're going to get into the people side of things. So I had when I was at Keith and we were doing the lean implementation. We were working in this one particular area, and the lead's job in this one area, he was making vows. His job, this is what he felt where he added value. Go get tools, go get parts, go get information from a supervisor, whatever needed to happen. During the course of the day, you pretty much saw him walking around the shop, right? Going and getting things and whatnot. Well, we took away all of his excuses. We gave him all of his information. We got all of his tools and made sure all of his tools were all in one place. And then I would walk by and he'd look up from his bench and scowl at me because I took away his job. But what he was doing was actually making parts, right? So there's that. So he wasn't very happy with, but what we did is we made him more value added and a bigger contributor to the company by doing that. And then the other side of it is the underused people, the organizations that pay for avoidable waste repeatedly in the front line that are potentially ignored. The team sees problems every day, I'm gonna get into the culture of continuous improvement here in a second. But one of the key components, and it sounds like you've got a great culture, is using your people to solve problems. And they will be the biggest advocate for change if you involve them in the solution. Sometimes we don't have real clear priorities on what's going on. This company that I was working with this week, I went and videoed and did observation, and there were things, people were moving from one thing to the next, but I had no idea what the priorities were visually or understood where things were being stacked up. So just using your visual controls out on your shop floor makes managing and leading a lot easier. Accountability, having those expectations, but you don't really reinforce them, right? Will cause waste and cause inconsistency. And then, how many think that firefighting and problem solving from day to day is real value added, right? It happens a lot. And we have a lot of firefights. So the more consistency and stability that we can have without having to fire, and there's always problems, but you want that to be the 10%, not the 90% of the time, right? or the 20% or an 80%. This is a model that we use in our leadership development and organizational development. And we talk about the culture of continuous improvement. If you read anything around the Toyota Way, they have what they call a kata model, which is very similar to this. But the first piece is setting expectations for your employees. Developing, deploying, and aligning your strategy, right? The next thing is bringing in some innovation, bringing in new ideas, just even how things flow on the floor, accept ideas, and then using your factory to tell the story of how well things are going. If you have a lead or somebody that's touching everybody 5 times a day to tell them what to do next, what to do next, what to do next, you're not going to get the efficiencies out of that you would if you just had your factory tell them what to do next. And everybody can see that they're working on the right job because the factory's telling everyone that that's the next priority to do. We just talked about this, the employee empowerment, bringing people into the solution, really driving down to root cause, and then developing and training those people to do the job well and to do it consistently. And finally, we need process-driven problem solving. Developing the process, and then when something goes wrong, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and going back to the old processes, but we're leveraging and saying, okay, we made this change, it did this, why did it do this, and what's the next step forward that we need to do? Because if you just go back, you're not gonna gain any ground. So we fixed one thing and created a new problem. Okay, let's solve that problem and move forward. And that's what we mean by process-driven problem solving. So what does it take to create a culture of continuous improvement? And these are the 4 H's. One is honesty and trust. And it's important for organizations to develop a culture where somebody feels safe to say, I did it, right? And typically that's done by not showing blame, but starting with the process first. What was it about this process? Did we follow the process? Did we train you well enough to the process, right? I would say 80% of the time it falls in those 2 categories, and the third one is they just didn't want to. And that's a whole different problem, because now you got employee issues and employee problems, right? But really focus on that process piece, and that takes the blame away. Because usually the first question is, who did it? Not what happened, right? So if you say who did it, then you're like, I'm not going to own up. I'm not going to fess up. But if we can say what happened and involve them in the solution, now you've got somebody on your side to solve the problem. Also having that humility, and both humility from the leadership and humility from your employees to admit what happened, to say, yeah, I probably didn't do that right, and I'm going to work to improve, right? Also, not taking everything so seriously, right? Make a game of it, right? What can we do next? How can we do it? Laughter supports creativity, and we want to make things creative and do it. And then this is the hardest, especially for leaders, is making sure people are developing these new habits. We made a change, we eliminated waste, and we're moving forward. Now I got to make sure that everyone is following that process, right? And you go, no, I didn't do it that way. No, this is the way we're doing it now, right? So those are the four H's. So when we look at this and we look at the leadership aspects of costs, typically it starts with just some unclear direction. People interpret jobs differently. When I'm doing transformational problem solving, I get to a point where I try to fully understand the person's situation, and then I ask questions to try to get them to a solution. But you might tell them something, and you know exactly what you told them, and you know exactly how they understood it. but they heard something completely different. So making sure that you check in with that person and they're repeating back what you're saying, or you're repeating back what they're saying and understanding what they're saying is really important. Really explaining the different methods and controlling and bringing in stability into what's going on really reduces your costs. Making things the same all the time. Yes, it's boring. Yes, I'm still working at the workstation, but now I know what to expect. And having those managers and having those leaders not reacting to things, but to guide, teach, lead, coach, right? It's not productive to fly off the handle. That almost always never happens. Good. Well, so what are the things that good leadership reduces? It reduces clarity is kindness, right? If we can be as clear as possible, we're providing the most kind thing we can do for our employees. Having those visual controls that people can see problems immediately and solve them immediately, and everybody sees it, and it's not just one person kind of trying to cover up their tracks. And when we can, I jumped that, I hit the wrong button. If I can get to the root cause of a problem and not just fix the Band-Aid or fix that one problem, but really start digging down to say what really caused this problem so that it never happens again, right? So many people have heard about the 5 whys. Then things are gonna get better and better, and you're not gonna have to continually firefight on the same problem. So what are the things I can do without spending any money on reducing costs, just from a leadership standpoint? 1, clarity is kindness. Make sure that everyone understands the priorities and it's very clear. Maybe it's written on a whiteboard. Maybe it's something that everyone can see, but making sure that everybody understands understands what they need to be doing. Standardization, studying your process, writing your process down. It doesn't have to be in a document. Put it up on the wall. This is our process, right? Put it at a workstation, right? So everybody can see this is what it is, and it helps people remind. And then again, visual management, visual controls, things that are going to talk about status, targets, abnormalities, that kind of thing. Get to the root cause of problems. And then daily coaching. Really talking with the people, asking your people questions instead of telling them what they need to do. And what asking questions does is it allows the employee to internalize why it's important. That they have to do it one way versus another way. So if they can bring it up for themselves, it's a lot better than you telling them what they need to do. So one of the things that you can do when you go out into your manufacturing area or your production area is ask a lot of questions. Look around, observe. Where do people wait? Where do they search? Where do they have tools? Where do they not have tools? Where do they have ingredients? Where do they not have ingredients? Where does product loop back? Rework loops, things that didn't go quite right. If you have multiple shifts, are there cases where day shift does it differently than night shift, and why, right? And challenging the norms. Why do we do it that way? Why is this normal? A lot of times waste is normal, inventory is normal, but if you challenge the status quo, own your standards. Say, this is the way we need to go. And what triggers escalation and what doesn't, and I can talk about escalation for a long time. And what would make it easier to do it right, or do things simpler, eliminate that waste. Things that we can do is, 1, short huddles, have a huddle board, gather around, communicate in the morning, and then let them go at it. Making priorities visible, we just talked about that, and defining owners. And Also follow up, okay, things didn't go quite right yesterday. What happened there? Why? Talk about what happened yesterday while it's fresh in their mind, right? And what can we learn from that? Things we can do each week is review the things that costed us money. Going back and making sure that people are following the processes that we had written down or put up on the wall. And remove obstacles that the team can't remove by themselves. Help them solve problems. And how does this usually feel when we're in that place? One, less firefighting, less emergencies that, when we get in the morning. Cleaner handoffs, and better use of labor hours. This is just fresh in mind, the company that I dealt with this week. When I did the video observation, there was probably 20 minutes not a machine was running. Everyone was doing something else, right? I didn't know what it was, but that was my observation. Once we showed that and reflected that, people went, oh, yeah, we're waiting for something else to happen. We're not getting... And I won't get into pull production, but if we had the pull, then people can look down and see what I need to do. They're not waiting for somebody to do something, and then communicating with them. And then what you will normally see is that these daily surprises will be 20% of your day, not 80% of your day, right? You'll have a more planned, less stressful way to go to run your operation. So now I want to talk a little bit about what you could do and not spend any money, but drive improvement and reduce costs. How many, just sitting right here, what is one cost pain point that you have right now that you might have that you can think of as you've been listening to this presentation? Anybody want to admit one? Anybody think about it? Go ahead.
I'd say like our physical production is really great, like actually putting the honey into the jar, but more like the administrative side, like how are we processing the invoices? There's a lot of time wasted there that I think we can find some efficiency.
There you go. That's good. And then what would be your hope? What would be your target condition? What would you like to see it? What would you like to see do better there?
I'd love to see something standardized. So if there's any hope of automating that, I think there's a lot of eliminated waste.
Sure.
Everybody on the same page, and then you can automate it.
Okay.
Wow, what are we going to do with our free time after that?
That's a great example. And the way that you can do that is just the next week, then just go out and observe the process. And and I did the videotape. And we told everybody what we were doing. We told them we're not blaming anybody. This is the process. But if you just go and stand and watch, right? You might be the boss and people are going to start doing things, but you'll still see those. Pretty soon they'll get used to it. But just taking the time to stand and watch and observe is really, you will see where people are not adding value. And then if you see something, then go chase it and find a standard, Find that admin, and if you standardize that admin, say, is that the way that we want to do it? And then it's a whole heck of a lot easier to automate that once you've standardized it, right? And then come back, and once you've trained to the standard, go back and train to it and coach them through it and get them to adhere to it. Any questions on that? So here's what I'd like you to leave. I've got two things I'd like you to leave with today. But one is I hope you can kind of shift your mind into get your waste goggles on and go out to your facilities and see where there might be waste. Also, as a leader, just be aware. Be aware of how unclear direction and weak follow-up quietly adds cost to your process, right? And then lead with practical steps that can start out with. So, and then we come right back to it. We can set all the systems up and we can do all the standardization, but as leaders, if we don't lead to the process, it'll never stick. If we don't have good accountability there, it won't stick. And we come back to continuous improvement here. And I just want to tell you a little bit about something that River Solutions has invested in the last, since the beginning of the year. So a lot of what we do, and we talked about this in the culture of continuous improvement, one is strategic alignment and strategic planning and setting expectations. But two is that how does that get down to your people, and how do people really understand? You guys have a strategic plan. You know what sales numbers you want to do at the end of this year. You know what needs to happen. But how are they going to work for you to hit those goals? Right? So we've invested in this KeenLink program that actually sets up a framework for driving execution. And that execution is backed up by a piece of software that enables your leaders and your employees to come together and understand where the disconnects might be in that alignment. We're in an executive trial right now, and just talking about core behaviors and whatnot is what has just been really valuable. So the conversations that this creates, it's not about the software, but it's really more about the conversations you can have with your employees. And the quality of those conversations that you have with those employees. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions. You can take my card, send me emails. If you've got issues or problems, I'm happy to just talk about them. We can set up a short call. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me up there. I'm on LinkedIn every day. So thanks for sitting through it, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.